In this video, we're going to discuss some pretty awesome van side hustles that you've probably not heard of before. These aren't your typical ideas like being an Uber Eats driver or a pizza delivery driver. These van side hustles require a little bit more skill than that, but they are incredible ideas. And with the additional skill, along with being able to drive a van, you can make incredible money. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Also, if you're new to the channel, my name is Adam Zwingler, and this channel is dedicated to helping you identify really good businesses in skilled labor, skilled trades, blue collar work, stuff of that nature. Start those ideas, build the businesses into ultimately what could potentially be a $10 million business over the course of a decade. If you're interested in just identifying really good business ideas or building that into something significant, then consider liking and subscribing. Van side hustle number one, which is a radon mitigation specialist. And if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, what the heck is a radon mitigation specialist? Which is exactly what I was wondering when my wife came to me recently and said, hey, we might need to be concerned about radon in our basement. We need to get a specialist out here to find out. So in the simplest of terms, let me break down for you what radon is and why a radon mitigation specialist is actually a great paying van side hustle. There's a lot of houses that have basements, and those basements are built into soil. And in the soil, there's something called radium. What is radium? I have no freaking clue. But what I do know is that radium breaks down into something called radon. And radon is a colorless, odorless gas. You can't smell it, you can't see it, but it is very potentially damaging to your lungs. It can create lung cancer, and it's especially damaging to kids. And if the radon levels in your basement are too high, you might not even know it, but you can be damaging your entire family. And that's where a radon mitigation specialist is needed to come out, check the levels, and if the levels are too high, implement what's called a radon mitigation system. As you can see on this chart that's popped up, there's 5 leading causes for lung cancer, and radon is on that chart right up there with smoking, air pollution, and other leading causes. So it is something that you need to have checked out. It's something that needs to be on your radar, and there's more people looking into this these days than you might think. According to a recent article, a radon mitigation system will run you anywhere between $804 to $5,000 depending on the size and complexity of the basement. These systems are relatively simple and straightforward to build, and if you build even just a handful of these a week, you can be making some serious cash. Okay, so let's go ahead and break down the numbers so you can see what you can make as a radon mitigation specialist with a van side hustle. So, looking at the average cost of a radon mitigation system in Colorado, keep in mind, our research is done always in Colorado. If you're gonna charge for a sub-slab, it's gonna be anywhere between $800 and $2,500. If you need a drain-based system, it could be anywhere between $800 and $2,000. If you need a sump pit, it would be anywhere between $800 and $2,500. And if we're talking about a crawl space, it could be easily anywhere between $1,000 and $5,000, depending on the complexity of the crawl space. Okay, so according to another article, the average radon mitigation system can be implemented in 1 to 2 days. So for the purpose of calculating our annual numbers on a business like this, we're gonna assume that you can actually put in about 3 radon systems a week. Let's go ahead and break down the numbers so we can see what our revenue on a business like this would potentially be. So, assuming that we charge, let's say, $1,500 for a radon mitigation system, the average radon mitigation system, we can do 3 a week. That works out to be $4,500 a week. Over the course of a month, you can do 12 of them, which works out to be $18,000 a month, which multiplied over 12 months is $216,000 in top line revenue. Okay, so looking at expenses, the first expense is your cost of materials, which I have pegged at about $200 per job. It might be a little bit higher, but the breakdown of those materials is about 4 things that you actually need. You need a radon fan, you need venting pipes, you need a monitoring device, and sealing materials. Assuming that you can do about 144 jobs in a year, that works out to be $28,000 in material costs, give or take $5,000, let's say. You've got annual insurance at roughly $12,000. I'm assuming about $1,000 a month in insurance. You've got van expenses of $2,500 a year. You've got fuel on the van at $5,000, and then you got just another miscellaneous expense of about $5,000. Guys, these are top level overviews. I'm not breaking down all the expenses on a business. You really need to do your own due diligence because I guarantee you there's more expenses than this in a business like this. But I've got the annual expenses pegged at about $53,000, give or take $10,000, okay? So if you subtract that from top line revenue, you can make pretty good money, you know, 150 $160,000 a year putting in radon mitigation systems as a van side hustle, maybe closer to a full-time job, but break that number down if you want to do less work and you'll be able to still clear probably 6 figures as a van side hustle. Let's move on to idea number 2, which is a rural post office delivery driver. Okay, so a rural post office delivery driver. Guys, this one feels more like just being a subcontractor. You get to use your own van. You get to wear your own clothes. You don't have to wear that stupid uniform that the city post office drivers have to wear. You don't get paid by the hour, you get paid by the van load. So you pull up your van, you load it up, and you get paid by the load. So when everything is delivered, you get paid. You can work as quickly or not as quickly as you want to. Being a post office delivery driver, there's a couple different options in terms of how much you work and how flexible you want your schedule to be. Obviously, as you get more committed to the job, you also get government benefits, which has its own perks. Let's go ahead and break down those options. Okay, so let's look at rural delivery carrier options in terms of the different positions that you can take. There's 4 of them. First is ARC, and that stands for Assistant Rural Carrier. This is an extremely part-time job, very, very few hours. You're maybe working an occasional weekend or a Sunday or a holiday. It's no more than that. The next is a RCA, which is a Rural Carrier Associate. This allows you to commit to more time. You're potentially the backup driver for somebody that does it full time. So whenever they take time off, you might be committed to their route for the whole week or two when they're on vacation. So it definitely requires more time commitment, and you never really know exactly when you're going to be stepping in and covering those people's hours, but the full-time employees' hours. But with that being said, you do potentially get health benefits along with this position. The next up is a PTF, which is a part-time flexible rural carrier. And this allows you to work even more hours. You get even better benefits. You usually get a 401k along with the hours that you work. And then lastly, there's RRC, which is a regular rural carrier. This is a full-time position. You have a route. You know what your route is typically, and whatever packages need to be delivered on that route, you show up every day, you load up the packages, and you are required to deliver them. This also comes with full benefits, and it's the highest pay. So let's go ahead and break down how much the pay can potentially be on these different positions. Okay, so this job feels a little different than the other jobs that I usually analyze, because almost everything that I teach on this channel is you gotta work for yourself, you gotta build a small team. That's when you're gonna really make the money. With this job, it's an actual job. You're working for the post office. So you're limited on how much money you can make. It does cap out. Let's go ahead and look at your 2 options. You can either be full-time and make between $72,000 and $94,000 a year, or you can be part-time and make somewhere between $5,000 and $72,000. So you just kind of have to figure out where you would fall on that scale, but pretty nice just to be able to load up your own van and wear your own clothes and go out in the country, drive around and deliver packages. So I like this as an option. You move into full-time work, you can be almost making 6 figures. It's definitely worth at least a mention. Let's move on to van side hustle number 3, which is everything gutters. And here's the thing, if you type into Google or Reddit and you go searching for quotes on gutters, what you're gonna find is that people are talking about this quite a bit, and they're getting quoted anywhere between $1,500 and $20,000 to have their gutters installed. So what we've decided to do is take a deep dive into gutters and figure out exactly what you can potentially charge for this unique side hustle that can be done with a van. Let's go ahead and break down the install costs to have gutters installed on a home. Okay, so with install costs, we're gonna make this very simple. There's really only 3 numbers that you need to remember. When it comes to ground level gutters and downspouts, it's typically $20 a foot to install gutters. If you drop up, or I guess not drop up, go up to the second level of a house, they'll typically charge you about $30 a foot for those gutters, because you typically need a second man, you need a longer ladder, it's just harder, right? And then an additional $5 if you want the mesh that goes over top of the gutters per foot, okay? So those are your 3 install costs. If you get quoted less than that, I would be aware of that, because that's probably what the going rate should be if you want this person to show up and do ongoing maintenance and repair and actually be there when you need them down the road if something breaks. So that price per foot is what a professional organization would actually charge to install gutters like this. Keep in mind, it's not going to be the price that the handyman down the street thinks that they can implement it at. But if you're a professional and you plan on being there for the long run, when people actually need service on these, you should be charging $20 to $30 a foot. Let's go ahead and pull up an example of a 3,000 square foot house and how much money you could potentially charge to put the gutters on a house like that. So let's assume on the ground level, there's about 160 feet of gutters that's needed, $20 per foot. That works out to be $3,200. Now you move up a level, and on level 2, there's maybe another 80 feet of gutters that's needed. That works out to be $2,400 for the top level. And then of course, you've got the gutter guards over the course of the entire 240 feet of gutters that's needed around the entire house. And that works out to be $1,200. So when you add it all up, a 3,000 square foot house like this would potentially go for $6,800 is what the quote would be to go out there and put gutters on the entire house. Not a bad price if you're going out there with a van side hustle and installing gutters. Now, keep in mind, these prices are based on Colorado prices, okay? It's probably a little bit different as you go throughout the country. California is probably more expensive. Louisiana is less expensive. You have to keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and break down the revenue numbers, the rough revenue numbers on a gutter business if you're doing this full time. And the way that I calculated that was, on average, let's just assume the average job is about $5,000 to implement gutters. And let's assume that you can do 1.5 jobs per week. Okay, so the total amount that you can make per week is $7,500, and the total amount that you can make per month is $30,000, which works out to be $360,000 implementing gutters annually. You may need one person to help you with this, but this can basically be done as a van side hustle, maybe one part-time employee that's helping you install gutters. Okay, so breaking down the rough expenses on a business like this, I estimated material expenses to be about 20%. It's gonna be more or less depending on what kind of material that you have. There's aluminum gutters, there's steel gutters, there's copper gutters, which are super expensive, but I assumed that you probably have about $1,000 per job that you have in expenses. Now, you can potentially do 78 jobs in a year, so your annual material expenses is probably going to be around $78,000. Now, give or take $10,000, $20,000. These are just rough ballpark, guys. Okay. So you've also got insurance. I've been estimating insurance at about $1,000 a month on a lot of these service-based skilled trades businesses. So $1,000 a month on a van and a couple different kinds of insurance that you need, workers' comp, all of that. So $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. You've got your annual van expenses, which is, let's just say $2,500 that you need to spend on the van. You got your fuel expenses throughout the year, which is maybe about $5,000 on the van. And then I just pegged it at another $5,000 for just some additional miscellaneous things. This is not all the expenses you have on a business like this, guys. This is just bucket categories. This is covering the biggest bucket categories of what you potentially have on a business like this. And all of that comes to about $102,000. And if you subtract $102,000 from your $360,000, you're going to roughly work out to $257,000 and change. Okay. Not bad amount for a van side hustle that could potentially turn into full-time work. Okay. A couple final thoughts on this business. $5,000 to implement something that is potentially there for the life of the house seems very reasonable, you know, and I actually think that this price to install gutters is going to go up a lot over the next decade or two. You know, with all of these trades service businesses, I think that the price that you're going to be able to charge for this going into the future is just going to keep climbing higher. Outside of the gutters and the downspouts, there's really very little material expense on a business like this. I think you've got to consider the fact that being on a ladder every day has its potential risks and pitfalls, and you've got to take that into account when you go into this kind of profession. And surprisingly, maintenance really isn't that big of a thing anymore. You've got these steel mesh guards that go over top of the gutters that keep most of the stuff out of the gutters. And, you know, people just don't need their gutters cleaned very often anymore. So those are some closing thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching this van side hustle video. Up like this. If you like it, I'll make more. If I see that this has done well, I will make more van side hustle videos. Please leave a comment if you liked it. Let me know that you want me to make more of these, and I will consider doing this along with the pickup truck side hustle videos. Okay, guys, on to the next.